All right, my next guest up tonight, he's a radio talk show host. Let's give him a late night welcome for Frank Morano.
Thank you, Johnny. How are you?
Hey, how are you, buddy?
I'm great. It's great to be here.
You're back home.
You know, it's funny. You and I guess, go back about 15 years.
At
I don't
least.
think I've ever had the privilege of being interviewed by you before. I never quite made the cut. All it took was for poor Joe Franklin to die for me to get a spot on the show. So thank you.
No, it isn't even that. Back in the day, I was doing a different show, and I didn't start this production until like 2008.
I'm teasing. I'm not.
But it's great to have you here.
No, it's great to be here, it's really great that you're doing this for Joe. It's quite a fitting tribute to hear everybody reminisce about him and to hear about the wide breadth of lives that he touched across all cross sections. I mean, there's not another human that's ever walked the earth that's touched as many lives as Joe Franklin, personally.
100%.
So, yeah, thank you for having me.
No, you're kidding me? And I know Frank had a real one-on-one great relationship. Frank used to do a show down here, the Frank Morano Show. And why don't you tell the story how you met Joe when he took you underneath his belt?
Well, I did a show just like you do called Morano Vision, and basically it made no bones about the fact that it was completely a ripoff of the Joe Franklin show.
Oh, yeah?
You know, completely. And when I would watch the Joe Franklin show as a kid, the thing that made it so special then is the same thing that makes it so special now. And you heard Bob Diamond allude to this earlier, which is that it was natural. It was really how people would talk. You know, nowadays you watch a talk show, the guests are pre-interviewed 5 times,
yes.
Everything's scripted. One person says it's scripted, how are you? The other guy reads from a cue card, fine. And Joe Franklin's show was so different, not only in that it was real conversation, but you just never really knew what to expect. You could see Babe Ruth's widow sitting next to a singing dentist, singing next to, you know, somebody that just happened to be in the audience, and then he'd ask them all, oh, what do you think of Eddie Cantor? So it was such a special show. And so when I started doing my own show as a teenager, I was really eager to emulate that show as best I could. And we had Joe's desk here at the time, and what a thrill that was to be able to do my show using the very same desk.
I know, that was sick. I remember that.
So that I would see all these major stars, and, you know, as Joe would say, the greats, the near greats, the in-greats, the has-beens, and the never-weres, all at that desk, and to be able to use it. So I would call Joe regularly to try and get him on the show. This is before I really got to know him. And this is before I really got to know that this is how Joe answers the phone. And so I'd call Joe, and almost every conversation would go about the same way. You know, 20, 30 seconds of, hey, Joe, you know, I do this cable show in Staten Island. I used your desk. Oh, Frank, yes, no, I remember. Listen to me. Frank, very important. You call me Thursday at 1 o'clock p.m. So I write this down. 3 days from now, Thursday, 1 o'clock. Okay, there, 212, and starts with 956, the number. Call, Joe, it's Frank. You told me to call you today at 1 o'clock. Frank, listen to me. I have 60 minutes in here that do in 30 minutes at a time. It's very important you call me Monday, 3:30. Promise me, Frank. Before I could even respond, he's hanging up the phone. Call back, Monday, 3:30. Joe, it's Frank Morano. You told me to call you today at 3:30. Frank, listen to me. Very important, critical. I'm working on very big things for you. Can you call me Wednesday, 9:30 a.m.? Promise me, Frank. You promise. And then eventually, you realize it's a lot shorter just to go see Joe and talk with him in person. Exactly. So then one time Joe had told me he was sick. He had a cold, you know, like a lot of folks get, and this was a particularly bad bug that Joe had gotten. So my mother at the time worked in Midtown, so I called her up. I said, look, Joe's not feeling well. You got to bring him some soup, you know, or something. So she brought him some soup, and he wouldn't let her leave the office. Kept her there for about 4.5 hours, and he never forgotten that. And since then, we were always the best of friends, and literally until the day he died. And he was a great mentor of mine, and I still honestly can't believe he's gone. He was just such an extraordinary talent, and more so than that.
And I only got to know him for about 4 years. But I became closer. Once he came on the show after that, it was like I knew him forever. And when he passed, it hit me. And you kept me updated what was going on, and I appreciate that. But like, I lost friends in the neighborhood. I got more touched when Joe died because I felt like I was learning from him.
No question. And that's what made Joe so special. And you hear so many people people who you've never heard of and people that were big stars. Talk about the impact that Joe had on them. And he really seemed to take a personal interest and a personal ownership in not only an individual's success, but how they were progressing in their craft. I'll tell you, I do a Sunday morning radio show. It ends at 8:30. And every week, without fail, he would be the first person to call me at 8:31 every single week to go over in detail whatever we did on the show. Now, the calls would get somewhat repetitive in that they would all begin with, Frank, this time you've really outdone yourself. I mean, that was the greatest show you've ever done. But so, and the thing that was so funny to me, Johnny, is that he would take notes during the show. And he says, Frank, let me ask you a question. Second item in the network news at 5 o'clock. The last words were, and they'll never be the same. What was that story? And I'd have to go back, listen to this, play it for him over the phone. And I said, Joe, what do you need this for? Oh, well, you know, I need it for my Bloomberg show. Now, he was taking more notes than he could possibly use in any one radio show. But he was just a joy to know, and really somebody so giving of his time, and just an incredible guy.
Well, Frank, I definitely want you back on the show sometime in the future. We'll sit down, we'll talk long. That's your time. Where can people find you on the internet?
You know, I'm on Twitter at Frank Morano, Frank Morano, and I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/MoranoFan, and you can actually go on there and see my 3 most recent interviews with Joe, in which he talks about all sorts of stuff, television, radio, and a lot of things that you might not know. Even the most avid Joe Franklin fan might not know about him.
All right, cool. Well, Frank, I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, Johnny, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Morano.
Thank you.